What is up, ladies and gentlemen, twerkers, jerkers, and lurkers, witches, liches, and bitches? It is time once again for another edition of Johnston Blackhorse dewz, the drawringz, with your host, me, Johnston Blackhorse, the one and only, and I'm here to do them motherfuck drawings. For those who are unaware, I got done like a couple hours ago doing like a gaming stream, and I was just trying to like stave off sleepiness because I had a very restless sleep, tossing and turning. But I think I got my second wind, so I'm gonna go ahead and do some streams. Let me rearrange my windows so I can properly see anybody who's chatting. And nobody's chatting. Nobody wants to hang out with me. Okay, I want to put something on in the background. Maybe some spooky stories. Oh shit. I've been checking out so many other channels that my spooky story channel got buried. Okay, there we go. Here we're going to be playing some road trip horror.
Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I can't remember exactly what I saw because I was a little kid, but to this day my parents swear I said this. Be me. Early 2000s. Around 7 or 8 years old. At the back seat while my dad drives and my mom at the front seat. Coming back from some random family party. Around 1 a.m. on a dark, empty country road. My parents are chatting about random stuff. Just looking through the window. Mom, who is she?
What?
That lady that was in the middle of the road. Silence. MP3.
It was Virgin Mary, son.
No, Mom, she was so ugly and creepy. Longer silence. WV. They became silent until we got home. They say they were scared shitless. There was no one on the road. None of them saw anything. To this day, I don't know what the hell I saw. They don't know what the hell I saw. I just know that since this event I love dark road trips. It evokes a feeling of mystery and the sensation of being observed. Let's discuss this topic and post our stories anons.
My wife and I live out of my truck. Life is sweet. In West Virginia, quiet zone camping. Beautiful, gorgeous mountain views, rainbows, the works. Late summer was pretty hot that night. Decide we don't want to cook and want to check out a town nearby for burgers and beers. Head out around 9:30 p.m. Pitch black out apart from what my headlights light up, winding country roads. Have a CB radio and a camera mounted on my dashboard. Reach a long stretch of road that has abandoned houses on the left side. CB flicks on and makes weird super mechanical sounds. Dash cam flicks off. Radio screen cuts off. What.jpg? Wife gasps and points in front of us. See huge black shape, roughly humanoid looking, maybe 6.5 to 7 feet tall on the left side of the double yellow road. Completely black, not see-through, vaguely cloudy. Turns toward us as I slam on the brakes. Hear all our shit fly everywhere in the back. The shadow drops down real low to the pavement. Crawls slinks off the road, kind of like how General Grievous walks on all appendages. Disappears out of line of sight behind a bush. CB stops screeching, everything is silent. Hear a deep growl from near where the shadow thing crawled away to. Floor it. Get another mile or so down the road before the dashcam and truck radio screen turn back on. My wife and I slept in town that night. The next day I checked the dash cam. Camera records in 3-minute chunks, memory card full of clips. Just the last 3 minutes of our ride is captured and repeated 50 times, no other clips saved. Dashcam hasn't worked right since.
Be me. I just turned 18. Finally got a car and license, feels good, man. I decided to go on a road trip with 2 of my best friends. Our plan was to travel to the mountain woods around 4 hours away from where we live, smoke weed and chill. It proceeds to get darker. We enjoy talking and listening to some music on the radio. The radio loses connection. That's weird.jpg. We decided to just enjoy some talking. My friend in the backseat falls asleep. Me and my friend in the front seats just drive in silence. We get near the woods. My friend gets really scared all of a sudden. Hey bro, are you okay?
I have a really bad feeling about this.
I just tell him to stop being a coward and chill out. Our fuel is really low. We stopped on a sideway in the woods and I asked my friend to help me tank the car. My friend and I got out of the car. I take the fuel out of the trunk.
Justin, what are you doing?
The friend who was asleep literally a minute ago is standing in the middle of the street, not moving at all. We didn't even see him leave the car. Maybe he just wants to take a piss. I feel this horrible sense of dread and the feeling that we need to get out of there immediately. I decide to ignore it and finish fueling the car and put the fuel in the tank. My friend walks up the road to Justin. Justin doesn't move an inch. Friend is around 2 meters away from him and suddenly turns around and runs to the car.
We need to go.
What do you mean, .jpg? What, why? We can't leave Justin there.
That's not Justin.
I turn around and Justin is still asleep in the back of the car. Oh no, .jpg. I start the car and start turning the other way around. I look in the side mirror. The Justin on the road is turned around face to us now. His proportions are really off and he has this horrible smile on him that still makes me terrified when I think of it. We wake up the real Justin and tell him we're going back home.
Guys, what the hell, why?
We tell him the story. He doesn't believe us at all until this day, thinks we're lying. My friend and the other friend have not talked about this event at all since. But I know he remembers it too.
Where did Melody go?
I was a
Maybe she's on the
long-range
wrong
truck
screen.
driver for nearly 5 years. My first year solo, I'm driving a load from Delaware to Alabama. Hit my break period and have to stop at a truck stop to rest for 30 minutes. Go in to use the bathroom and get some coffee. Start talking to another trucker. Be careful out there, and this weather is seriously looking like a tornado, and it's tornado season down here. Complete my break time and get back down the road. As soon as I'm back on the road to my stop, I notice the wild amount of downed trees and screwed up buildings. Likely missed being right in the range of a tornado by minutes tops. Scary shit.
Nothing as crazy as everyone else, but at least you know my story is real. Driving down a heavily wooded back road coming back from a climbing trip with a good friend. Just chatting and having a good time as usual. Windows fully down, music blasting. Cruising at 90+ miles per hour since no one is around. All of a sudden my friend turns down the music for no reason. Slows down and pulls off to the side of the road. Ask him what's up.
I thought I saw someone I knew back there.
I ask him what the hell he means. He looks distant and doesn't really respond. Ask him again, WTF is his deal. He turns to me and his face is pure white and says I feel strange. Has a massive seizure on the spot. No idea what to do, freaking out. Eventually passes and my friend recovers enough that we can talk and he lets me drive him to the hospital. Ask him about it later and he says he doesn't remember seeing anyone, saying he saw anyone, or even stopping the car. If he didn't stop we would have died for sure, slamming into a tree at 90+ miles per hour. Wonder who or what he thought he saw to this day that made him stop. Another story that didn't happen to me, but happened to a friend that this story reminded me of. Friend coming back from slacklining. Sitting in the passenger seat with them driving. They both see a badly crashed, flipped over car on the side of the road. Of course on a road that doesn't see much traffic because of slacklining. There's a man standing next to the flipped over car. He looks beat up and bloody and he is hitchhiking. Friend doesn't want to pick him up, but M is driving and it's his car and he wants to help the guy out. They pull over and the guy gets in the back. Ask him some general questions, mainly if he's hurt and needs to go to the hospital. Adamantly denies that he's hurt and says he doesn't need the hospital. They lightly argue about it for a little while before the man simply asks them to take him to 7-Eleven so he can get a new phone and make a phone call. Reluctantly agree. Say he doesn't talk much the rest of the ride. Drop him off at 7-Eleven. A few weeks later, a friend is chilling at home and the police come knocking on his door. Show him a picture of the hitchhiker he picked up. A friend says that he and M picked the guy up and took him to 7-Eleven. The cops say the man is now on trial for killing his pregnant wife and he and M have to appear in court to give testimony. Apparently, the guy killed his wife, got behind the wheel drunk, crashed his car, and then my friend and him picked him up. Literally picked up a hitchhiking murderer. Ironically said he was nice enough but quiet.
Fucking crazy.
Had this
eh?
weird bit happen a few years ago. Involved a girl I dated and we went out for the summer. Some other weird stuff happened when we were traveling, but this was certain the weirdest and felt paranormal. Be me. Not finding anyone to date in 2014. Find cutie pie when hanging out with relatives one weekend. She's a black girl, a little round but not a land whale. She came from a super religious family and often dressed very conservatively, but knew her way around Vidya like nobody's business. We started dating a few times. Good
Trying to
times.
Look up sliced tomatoes.
JPG. June rolls around, told her one day that I want to go on a road trip with my paid vacation. She likes this, and agrees to go. We load up a shitty Taurus with some luggage and head off down the road. We decided to go up to New York City to visit an extended family member of mine. Enter Pennsylvania on the interstate, it's about 3 a.m. Stop at the rest area because your girlfriend needs to go to the bathroom. There are truckers sleeping in their trucks but nobody parked in front of the actual rest area. Decided to go take piss myself. Enter an eerie and empty bathroom. Doing thing at the stall and I hear toilet flush in a stall.
Melody.
WTF. I want to look but need to pee because 100 miles between rest areas. Toilet next to it flushes. Screw that.exe. Get done and stride over to see what's triggering them. All toilets are manual, hand-flushed toilets. Not automatic. Realize something is extremely creepy now. Wash hands because you don't want germs, bolt out. Wait in the rest area lobby despite hot weather and bugs. I wanted to go to the car, and probably should've. I need to clarify this small bit for clarification, and am not green texting this bit. My girlfriend decided to wear a tent of a denim overalls dress for this trip. It had the whole top like an overalls, went about mid-calf and could spread really wide if she held the skirt out. She had a lime green t-shirt, sneakers, and a white net petticoat thing to make the dress stick out, kind of like a retro look. I know I probably went into too much detail, but I need to get that laid out. Bathroom door to the men's room slams open. Girlfriend comes out. Shocked, start to go over and ask what the hell. Makes a beeline to the door and walks out, as if I didn't exist. I start to go after her when I realize something is off and not right. Girlfriend has yanked up the back of her dress, and is tugging at her gray panties as if she got a wedgie. Her petticoat is nowhere to be seen. Drops dress and walks over to the car, tries the door. When it doesn't open, try all the doors. Frozen in fear, not sure what to do. I'm suddenly realizing this isn't my girlfriend. Hear a yelp from the ladies' bathroom, and hear this low thundering of water. Door bursts open and my GF is there looking panicked. Forget about things in the car, looking at her in disbelief. I think she realized something was wrong, quickly grabbing my hand and starting to lead me outside. I finally get my mind in gear and look back at the car.
Yeah, there she is.
The girlfriend copycat is nowhere in sight. We quickly walked towards the car. I ask her what's wrong, she cuts me off and tells me she'll tell me when we're on the road. Get in the car, start up. As we start to drive away, girlfriend screams and tells me to book it. I want to ask her WTF is she on, but I barely miss that my headlights pass onto a figure on the side of the embankment of the ramp. It looks like my girlfriend, but there is no face. It starts to bolt towards the car. I gun the engine and we rocket onto the interstate. As we finally calm down, the girlfriend collects her marbles and tells me toilets were randomly flushing. I tell her about the copycat I had seen come out of the men's room. She is utterly confused and embarrassed. Girlfriend may be sexy, but doesn't do upskirts in public. Assures me she's the real one. Flashes me heaven, shows she has a petticoat and orange panties. Impressed I didn't fall for her fake. Don't know what the heck that was, never saw anything like that again. I'll post the others as they come along. I have the day off tonight and just reminiscing about her I guess. That road trip was one of the best times we've ever had together, but those few unnerving things stuck out some. This part 1 won't green text, and it threw me off for a second before I realized what was going on. The door to the men's bathroom door slams open, and my girlfriend comes out. This immediately caught guard as I had just come from there, and knew my girlfriend was in the ladies' room. My mind hadn't quite processed what had happened.
Got one where nothing really happened, but I got spooked nonetheless. Once drove across the entire state of Texas. I'm based out of Louisiana, so I was driving west en route to El Paso. This drive was for work, so I was taking a delivery truck with cargo space, meaning I couldn't see the back of it. After a full day's drive, the sun begins to set. I'm somewhere in West Texas and it's getting dark. Feel the truck kinda buckle and bounce almost like I hit a bad dip in the road. I never saw a dip and I'm worried the truck might have an issue, so I pulled over. By this point the sun has set, but it's a full moon. Check the truck, the tires, the cargo space. Everything looks good. Then I don't know why I decide to look on top of the actual truck. Peek my head over. Instantly hit.
Oh. I am so glad the weather is starting to lighten up. Mix some of my lemonade and Sunny D. Damn it. And I think I am 100% over my flu. And my strength is starting to return. Remember when I was like sort of post-flu and I was complaining about just doing some of my chores, but trying to do them with the same speed and vigor that I used to, and it would just fucking wear me out. I'd just be all winded and everything. Do I have a cup? But yeah, since I've been sick, like my freaking cabin has been, it's gone to shit. I've tried to clean up a little bit while I was still kind of recovering, but even that was wearing me out. But now I'm feeling a lot better. I'm doing a lot better. Well, hell, I'm the only one drinking it, so I may as well just fucking. Oh. Woo! Excuse me. Oh, what's up, Gordienko Sergey? That's a pretty interesting name. I'm not sure if I've seen it in chat before. If this is your first time, welcome to my stream, Gordienko Sergey. Gordienko. All right. Anyway, back to the stories and back to the drawing.
With a prickly feeling all over my arms and neck. There's nothing on the truck, of course, but I get this feeling like something is staring right back at me. I don't know how else to explain it. The weirdest thing I ever felt. I actually flinched, like when you walk around a corner and almost run into someone. Nearly fell off the damn truck. Quickly book it back inside the truck. Lock the doors. Sit there for a minute, almost like I was expecting to hear something. Never did. Started the truck and took off. Drove throughout the rest of the night without incident. Story I heard my uncle tell once. Uncle's girlfriend moves up to Massachusetts. He's from Louisiana. He drives up to see her 1 week.
I've noticed that I've had like several people coming from Russia. I don't know where like everyone hails from. Like I assume like everyone's from America for the most part. But then there's like a few people with like interesting names who turn out to be from Russia. Like, oh hey, cool. Do I have fans and supporters in Russia? That's pretty neat. Anyway, just thought I'd point that out.
On the final
But
night, he
cool.
decides to
Glad to
keep
have you.
driving after dark, figuring he can make it before midnight. Lonely stretch of road. This is the part that always gives me chills when he tells it. There's no one on the road when he glances into the rearview mirror and sees someone sitting there. Rear passenger side. The person suddenly lights up as though there are headlights bearing down on my uncle, like he's about to get into a head-on collision. Uncle swerves his truck and nearly goes skidding off the road but manages to stay on the highway. Skids to a stop as he realizes there are no other cars around. The highway is dead silent for a moment. Then he hears the sound of glass breaking. Finds the back passenger window where he saw the person shattered to shit.
So I just got
Yeah.
back from a road trip across the country and had some weird things occur to me along the way. The first paranormal thing I had happened, oddly enough, was in Roswell, New Mexico while doing work exchange. Well, I was out in the desert staying at this place where an older cowboy-looking guy hosted couch surfers and workaways, and everything was cool the first night I got there. He showed me my room and I chilled and went to bed. The next morning I got up and walked out to have a smoke on the porch, and dude was sitting outside drinking coffee and smoking L, so I grabbed a chair to do the same. After that I decided to go make breakfast and get out of that conversation as fast as possible. This is when the odd shit started. I walked into the bathroom to piss, and when I was leaving I noticed a face on the door and it was really surreal looking, so then started paying attention. I walk into the room I'm staying in and the pillow out of nowhere just rolls from the back of the bed to the front. I stare at it. Try to rationalize it, then I just laugh. Then I sit down and load Netflix on my tablet and immediately hear a voice say, "What are you going to do, sit in bed all day? You can't do that." And I got up as fast as I could to see if the dude was by my door talking or something, and then I looked and he was all the way across the house where I left him outside with the doors and windows shut smoking a cigarette still.
Weird.
So then I just go back to my room and sit down and try to comprehend what just happened, and that still doesn't make sense to me because I heard the voice like it was just right there with me. I decided immediately that it was my spirit guides telling me that I need to get out of there, so right as he went to the post office I packed my things up and headed out back on the road. My story, all real. So I spent the summer in Hawaii doing a work exchange program, and ever since I got there a lot of weird shit started happening to me. Mostly synchronistic things and the feeling of having a spiritual awakening.
We have more than 100 nationalities, therefore in terms of names there is a wide variety. Huh. Cool.
Type thing going on. I thought that whenever I left the island that things would kind of go back to normal, but the synchronicity never ceased up. After Hawaii I went to California and spent the last of my money buying a cheap car so I could road trip back home to the other side of the country. The whole road trip was pretty flawless with the exception of the weird shit said by the guy in New Mexico. After the thing in New Mexico I went straight to Texas the same day and stayed at one of my buddy's sister's house in Dallas, and then the next day I went to Richmond, Texas and stayed for 3 days with my friend from back home. The day before I was leaving I said that I wanted to go to Florida and visit my uncle, and I messaged him and he hadn't been messaging me back, and then I find out the same day I message him he had a stroke. So I end up going to Florida instead of going back home, and I spent a couple weeks there house sitting until he got out of the hospital. I started having more odd synchronicity there in Florida with conversations I would have with my uncle and friends and King of the Hill of all things for some reason. I'm going to post comments with the synchronicity shortly after this. It's messed up. After he got out of the hospital we started hanging out and he started back into his old routine of going to the bar and doing cocaine and shit. I could see that it was really screwed his life up since I was observing it from the outside, and I really don't have much of a relationship with him aside from a few encounters when we were younger. But the really weird shit started happening with me and my uncle whenever I started burning sage and asking my spirit guides to help. That's when shit started getting funky. So when I first got to Florida I decided to look up cool shops around the area, and I found this gem store that's got all kinds of things like incense, salt lamps, tarot cards. That's where I found my first bundle of sage that I ever purchased. I immediately went back to my uncle's house and did a cleansing ceremony on the whole place, then went and visited him in the hospital and burned it for him while we were outside. That night after I returned home was when the synchronicity involving King of the Hill started occurring. So I put in a random disc and start the episode while I'm writing some lyrics down. The episode that starts is one where they are having a barbecue outside in Texas and it starts snowing and everyone starts freaking out. At the same time, my friend in Texas, where I just left from, sends me a Snapchat of him outside Richmond driving in the snow, saying these Texans are gonna know what hit them with all this snow. And I look up on the screen and it's playing the same exact thing that he's saying basically. Then the next day I had a conversation with my uncle about how one time he walked by a photograph of himself and didn't realize who was in the picture because he had grown older and it kind of induced an existential crisis with him. Same night.
Oh, talking about synchronicity, like the guy in the story. When I was a kid, just going to school or doing whatever, I had this like constant reoccurring synchronicity when involving the Simpsons of all things. But as a kid, like growing up and like like I'd just be doing whatever. But then as I'm going about my day, like a joke or an episode of The Simpsons would just kind of pop in my head, and I would just kind of like play it in my head and just like think about the joke or that particular episode and just kind of like run it on repeat for a little bit. But the very next chance I got to like sit down and watch The Simpsons, it would be that episode. And it was like pretty cool at first, but then like it was like such a common occurrence that I didn't know what to call it, but I guess that's what it is, like just noting it as synchronicity. It's just weird how like things like that end up, like you think of like a joke or like one of your favorite episodes from a TV show, and the next chance you get to sit down and watch that show, it's the exact same episode that you were just like thinking of like either moments or days beforehand. But yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. The synchronicity. I haven't had it like happen for a long while because I've just fallen out from like watching The Simpsons. It's just become like a pale imitation of what it used to be. Like back when The Simpsons was fresh, it was like a trendsetter, and it was popular. It was funny, but nowadays it just seems like they like dumb themselves down to the lowest common denominator, or just like they're playing catch up, trying to grab onto the coattails of like these passing fads that they're attempting to like mimic in an attempt to stay relevant. But once they started doing that, I just kind of fell off the wayside. It was like I'm not into the show anymore. But I guess I should check out a new episode. Look, the last time I did that though, the episode was terrible. The writing was awful. The edits were just very jarring. It didn't tell like a cohesive like story from point A to point B. It would try to tell a story, but then it would just like leave parts of the plot out. So there were these plot holes that just kind of, I don't know, they just ignored. And I'm thinking like, how did they get from that one scene to the other scene? Like what's going on here? Anyway, it was weird, but that's what I think of The Simpsons nowadays. Is not good. Is very not good. But maybe I should check out a new episode sometime soon. I don't know. I'm just not a fan anymore. Anyway, back to the stories and the drawing.
I go home pop in an episode of King of the Hill and Peggy walks by a photograph of herself and stops and says, "Who is that?" and freaks out because she doesn't recognize herself. Night after that I'm writing lyrics on the couch and the lyrics I write down are seen when I dance in my head, it's by the graves with the dead. We burn sage for sleeping in and sing songs for the rest, and right as I finish the last word I hear Hank Hill's boss in the background say, "Dang it Hank, I bet you're gonna go dance by my grave when I'm dead with the rest of them." The other one was I was having a conversation with one of my friends about spirit guides and how whenever you have bad karma your spirit guides will do something to alter your path to make you have to balance out your karma. It may seem like a bad thing at the time, but it's actually a good thing. After that conversation I put in another random disc of King of the Hill and started up, and the episode is about Buckley and Leanne and how Buckley is Leanne's guardian angel. In the episode she's talking to Buckley's angel in her car and it ends up making her have a wreck and the accident causes her to miss her test at school. But it ends up being for the good because she made some girls that are going to community college and it inspires her to go there herself instead of beauty college. The next one involves something that I've been talking about for quite a while. I have a theory that dogs are manifestations of your subconscious and your spirit. Whenever you take on a dog you become part of it and it becomes part of you. On the third night of me being in Florida I had a conversation about that with my uncle because I think that my dogs really reflect me, and whenever we go home that night I pop in another random disc of King of the Hill and the first episode that comes on is about Hank and his dog Lady Bird, and the episode involves Hank taking her to the vet to see if she's pregnant and finding out that she can't have puppies because she has a narrow urethra just like Hank does, meaning that she is an exact reflection of her owner. The next day after all of that shit I take my uncle to the bar again for the third night in a row and he does the same shit that he's been doing every night, which involves buying cocaine and drinking mass amounts of alcohol.
Gordienko says The Simpsons got worse and worse every season after about season 8. I don't know what season I fell off at, but I think I would have to agree. I'm not sure like what episodes lie in season 8, but for me, I think I started to peter out when they went full digital, because from what I understand, The Simpsons was the like last remaining TV show that was like fully like hand drawn on a traditional medium, like using like plastic cells and cell painting. They were the last holdouts to continue using like traditional mediums in order to like create animation, because all the animation that was like that had popped up during the run of The Simpsons, like they started all going digital. It was like all just can't like TV Paint, I believe, and I think Toon Boom, like all the shows were going like full digital. But when The Simpsons decided to just switch from like traditional cell animation to digital, it started to lose that like luster for me. Like in a sense, like The Simpsons being the last traditionally animated like cell animation medium, like it felt like it was more tangible, if you can understand me. Like it felt a little more real. But when it went full digital, like it just lost some of that luster. It lost that charm, that warmth that it used to have. And then as the years went on, I saw them like I noticed. I don't think anyone else noticed, but I noticed that they tried to manipulate the digital animation to make it look like cell animation. When you go back and watch like a cell animated movie or TV show from way back in the day, you'll see that the painted cells will have like a bit of a shadow to it, because what they do is like they take the cell animation, they place it on the background, and they put like a glass plate over it, and they take a picture, and they do this for each frame of animation. And in those pictures, you can see like the paint and the ink on the cell itself, like cast a shadow on the background that it's being photographed against. So like of course when Simpsons went full digital, they lost that little shadow. But then as the years went on, I noticed that they digitally tried to manipulate, like superimpose a shadow in there to mimic cell animation. I think it was their attempt to like just kind of bring that sense of warmth back from the cell animated days. But I'm not sure if anyone else noticed, but I definitely took notice. I'm not sure if they still do it these days because like I said, like I've fallen way off the map concerning the Simpsons. But anyway, Haska says no. Simpsons is terrible now. The characters are a mockery of their original selves. Yeah. Some user says talking cell animation. Yes, talking cell animation. I saw this multi-layer cell animation parallax machine from behind the scenes of Automos Memory. Oh, fucking, I can't remember his name. Like Otomo Tezuka Memories from 1995 makes me respect the OG animators. Oh yeah, like fucking the process back then was so like labor intensive. Nowadays, like a guy can like crank out an animation all on his own, like these YouTube animators do. But back then, you had like the sketching department, the inking department, the painting department, and sometimes like they would try to cut out some of the middleman process by like making the drawn like paper animation. They would try to make that as clean as possible and just use that to scan it into a machine to then print like cell animation from that. So instead of like um having like a crew of inkers like ink the paper animation onto a plastic cell, they would just scan the paper animation and print that out on a cell and then hand that off to the painter department. You can see that technique done in a lot of the old 2D animated Disney films, such as I believe Robin Hood, 101 Dalmatians. I think the Jungle Book employed it also as well. But yeah, like you can see like the outlines on some of the characters. They have the kind of like hairy like like the hairy lines from like the actual paper and pencil animation, and you can also sort of like see like some of the faded like sketch lines that are still um present because they weren't able to like really clean it completely, but it still gave it like a certain type of a certain type of charm on its own, instead of like having like the crisp pristine lines you would get from an inker. Like the rough like pencil scanned animation cells had this like raw roughness to it, which is pretty interesting to see, and it gave like a certain like panache or style to the animation. But it was pretty cool. Dasko says, "Oh, YouTube is pumping monetization into short form vids, so animators may have a resurgence." Oh, Rubber Ross was talking about it. Some user says, "I've been very anti-shorts, but I'm all for empowering animators. Those sketchy lines gives it, yeah, the sketchy lines do give it character." Anyway, back to the spooky stories and the drawing. Where did where did Melody run off to? She was here like a little while ago, like at the beginning, but she just disappeared. I'm just gonna boop her on in Discord. Boop. Okay.
And every night we've been doing the same thing. I'll take him to the bar and then go to the local bookstore and read some shit for free. Tonight I decided to go home and do a sage ceremony in his house because it just felt like I needed to do it. On the way to my uncle's house to do the sage ceremony, I was in my car and I lit the bundle of sage, and right as I lit it, the Nako song I was listening to said, "We burn our sage," and I laugh out loud because I'm lighting the bundle as it happens, and then I look up and on the building to my left there's a sign lit up that says Sage Biscuits, and then I said WTF. Super weird timing. Anyway, I got to my uncle's and I asked the spirits to present my uncle with an opportunity to confront his demons and get on the correct path. I do this for about 10 minutes inside of his house, and then I head back to the bookstore for a little bit. While I'm at the bookstore, I find this book that says Idiot's Guide for Akashic Records, and I flip through for a minute until I land on the page that mentions something about karma. And then I see on the page that it mentions something about Christmas, which is super weird because nothing else in the book does, and the time was 2 days before Christmas. And I thought it had a lot of relevance, so I sent it to my uncle who is at the bar. After that I head back to the bar to wait for him outside, and I ended up getting a call from his friend that I need to come in because some guys inside were upsetting him. I end up going inside and getting him to come out and smoke a cigarette in front of the bar. And this guy comes out again, named James, in a blue car dealer shirt, and me and James have a short conversation about why I am in Florida and a couple other things, and I just got a really bad vibe from him immediately and decided to walk away back to my car because my uncle is fine at this point. Whenever I get back to the car, my uncle in the Manners Loan outside, and the guy says to him, "Hey, do you have any coke on you?" And my uncle said that he just had enough for himself. The guy kept going on about how they should do it, and my uncle insisted that he only had enough and that he was trying to quit. And right when he said that he was trying to quit, the guy said, "Well, look man, your boy left you, it's just us out here. We ought to just go in the back and do this shit. No one's around. Your boy left you." And then he proceeds to pull out the full 8-ball of cocaine and say, "Come on man, let's just go run through this shit." My uncle starts getting upset and saying, "My boy didn't leave me, my boy didn't leave me," and I hear him from the parking lot and yell his name. He comes over to my car and gets in, and the first thing I say to him is that I really just don't like that James guy. And then he proceeds to tell me the story about the cocaine. After that I said that I thought James was the devil, and I explained the sage ceremony that I did at his house, and he was kind of understanding about what we thought was going on. So we decide to go home, and he finishes his little baggie off and we stay up till 4 a.m. talking about all kinds of shit. And I explained what I thought the passage in the book meant to me. And to me it means that whenever you take a step genuine forward, your past karma is immediately released and you have to stick with it. We go to sleep and wake up 4 hours later to a call from his dog sitter, who has had his dog since he got put in the hospital. She says that something happened with the dog this morning, and I just woke up sick, and added been doing really well up until today. So they bring the dog over and I carry it in the house in a blanket. It's a pretty big lab dog. It immediately walks over to my clothes and lays down on them, and my uncle says, "Sage really likes your clothes. He must smell your dog's," and I look at him and say, "What do you mean your dog's name is Sage?" And I stop to think a little bit about all the shit that happened the night before, and then decide that I need to burn some sage for his dog to try to make it feel better. So I get my bundle out in the light, and then I go over to the dog and I pet it and blow the sage at it and tell it that I hope it feels better and that it's all right to go. And the dog lifts its nose up for the first time since it got home and takes a big whiff of the sage in and looks up my uncle and puts its tongue out like it's giving a kiss, and then stands up and stumbles over to him and he pets him on the side. Then the dog walks into the bedroom and lays down and dies of a stroke. Within 10 minutes of being back. Wrapping back around to what I said with the King of the Hill, dogs being manifestations of you and your subconscious. After the dog passed away, we just hung out at the house for a while, and then he decided that he didn't want to bury the dog, but rather he wanted to put it in the ocean and send it off and water. So we pack it up in my car and head to the ocean, and we find a good spot ere the tide will take him out and push him out into the water a little bit. While I was pushing him out, I had a bundle of sage burning for Sage the dog, and I was saying that I hope that he has a great life and other sorts of nice things. And right when I walked away from the body, literally 50 fish out of nowhere just started hopping out of the water one by one, and they didn't stop until the sun was down. And behind the fish were birds crowing and cackling. Whenever we got there, the water was calm and there were no noises around. My uncle decided that the animals knew that Sage was with them now. That same night my uncle gets sad again and decides that he wants to go to the bar, so I take him and he does the same shit over again. But tonight we got back to the house and for some reason the keys to the front door stopped working. The deadbolt and the bottom lock. It's kind of funny to me because I have been there for 3 weeks up until this point using them every single day and never had a problem with them. My uncle's determination was that Sage was mad because he repeated his actions again and that he was pushing him out of the house. Because my uncle's position right now is taking care of my grandparents back home. And he was avoiding it by living his life down there in Florida, only serving himself. This newfound clarity was found after everything that happened for him.
Mississippi Delta. I'm visiting family in the Delta right now. What a coincidence. I don't have much to share, but all of my experiences were actually while driving in the Delta, so I'll share a bit. Been on the road most of the day. Around 3 a.m. Driving on the highway through a small town. Nothing but nowhere, i.e. the Delta, up ahead. Barely seen any cars for the last couple of hours. Color me surprised when a semi passes me. Something is in the flatbed. It's covered with some sort of tarp, but I can immediately tell that it's unusual. Round, stubby, made of some sort of metal. It looks like a small flying saucer. Wonder if it isn't a movie prop before remembering I'm driving through the middle of nowhere. The semi-truck was gone just as soon as it came. The rest of the drive was uneventful. There's some farmland in the direction the truck was heading, so it's very possible that they were driving a prop for some show or movie. At the time, though, I was thoroughly confused and half anticipated a Men in Black situation the next morning. Besides that situation, I've seen occasional large shadows either in the road or off the
Howdy,
side
where'd
of
you
the
go?
road, like 8 or 9 feet humanoid figures that disappear as I
Maybe
approach them.
she-
Those always appear in a specific
picking
spot right next to a woodsy area.
Oh, okay. First, I'm gonna go ahead and get myself some coffee. I will. Whoops. I will BRB. Ugh. Oh, I can't get coffee without my freaking mug. Okay. And I'm back. Is Melody back too? Nope. Alright.
Nothing to write home about, but I figured it could help get the thread moving.
Last summer. Road trip around Idaho. Party of 6 friends.
Okay.
Get to the campsite. All is well. Night 3, go for a walk. Walking down the road, no lights. 2 miles from the campsite along a wooded road. Shooting the shit, talking about the paranormal. We agree that if an alien is going to abduct us, we should focus our thoughts on a familiar being so we can collectively recognize a shapeshifter. We agree on Elvis. Our group thins out across 150 yards. Everyone gets quiet. Can't see each other. Without mentioning it, we all regroup and veer off into the woods down a forest trail. We arrive back at our campsite and everyone goes to bed without speaking. I assumed everyone was tired and get ready for bed. My bro is sitting on the bench in a stupor and is convinced we switched timelines. I have to get him to chill out and sleep. Start thinking about it. I never saw Elvis, so I should be fine. He couldn't remember what happened that night. Wonder if he saw Elvis when we separated. Did his memory get messed with?
Oh,
Elvis was on my mind for the next couple
Melody was
weeks
making
and I couldn't shake
munchers.
it.
Be sure to take pictures. I
Driving
want
through
to see.
the forests of
What did
Eastern
you make,
Oregon
love?
with my girlfriend, maybe 11 or 12
I wanna
p.m.
know.
Clear night, no clouds and a full moon. Late October, so pretty cold and windy. Full night drive mode, great music playing, we're talking, having a great time. Decide to stop at a lookout point and take in the view. Get out of the car and walk maybe 300 to 400 feet to the edge of the cliff/ridge. As soon as we get there, the car alarm goes off. I don't think much of it and turn it off, maybe wind will set it off. 5 minutes later, the car alarm goes off again.
Turkey
This
burgers
time
with
we're a little
turkey bacon?
confused and go back to the car. Inspect around, find nothing. Take the
You
got out
can't
of the
make
glove box just in
bacon from
case
a
and go back to
turkey.
lookout. Nothing much happens for maybe 15 or
Sounds
20
good,
minutes.
though. Oh, I love
Then the
me some
car alarm goes off again. Now I'm concerned, plus my girlfriend wants to leave. On the way back to the car, I realize it's gone totally silent. Like completely, eerily, utterly quiet. No crickets or wind or trees or anything at all. Really alarmed by now. Tell GF to stay in the car and lock the door. Spend the next 5 minutes searching the immediate area with my gun drawn and flashlight in hand. The only thing I found was the long rotten skeleton of some prey animal and a small pile of rocks next to it. Never found out what set off the alarm or what the silence was. Maybe not the strangest experience, but I still wonder about it to this day.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
Oh. I'm feeling pretty good. Now that I'm over this flu, like I can like breathe easier. Like my strength is coming back. I don't get as winded as I used to. And weather's starting to get a lot nicer. It's not as like fucking frigid as it usually is. Still kind of cold, but not as fucking freezing as it was. let me go ahead and check the 5-day weather forecast. Or 7-day forecast. All right. Nothing but like partly sunny and sunny days for the whole fucking week. Going to be dipping back into the high teens as far as temperature goes, but for the most part, staying in the kind of like mid 20s. Sweet. I love it. I love it. Ho ho ho. Ho ho ho. Everybody will
Back
come
to the site.
fighting. Them kicks were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. Them moves were done with expert timing. They were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They're chopping things up and chopping things down. Oh, ho, ho. Such a fucking goof. All right. Jumping back to this other stories, spooky stories we didn't get a chance to finish. I'm just going to go ahead and start from the beginning. We were like just maybe like 3 minutes in before I think I got distracted with a rant. I was fucking ranting like crazy. I'm always good for a rant.
Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I wonder if there are any relations to Christopher Lee who know about this channel that's using like a digital recreation of his voice. It's pretty cool. I enjoy the channel, but like I'm thinking about is like I wonder what his family thinks. Would they be cool with it? I don't know, but I wouldn't doubt that they would be cool with it. You know, like Christopher Lee is like an actor for the ages, rest his soul, and he's got such like an incredible voice, like so recognizable. So, you know, like why not let people like utilize a digital recreation of his voice to convey like spooky stories in a way that only Christopher Lee could. Anyway, it was just a random thought.
I was camping in Colorado once with a group of friends. There were about 6 of us. We set up camp in a sweet rock outcrop where there were 3 large boulders leaning against each other with a hole at the top and enough room to sit underneath. This was during a fire ban, so it was the perfect place to put our campfire, so we set up the tent not far off. Middle of the night comes and we are running out of firewood. We remember a campsite nearby that had nobody there during the day and plenty of wood, but we had been hearing voices all evening. Just talking, nothing strange, and assumed it was that nearby campsite. So we walked over to ask if we could borrow some wood and chop some more to return it the next morning. The campsite was still completely empty at night. There was a Jeep there and we figured the campers may have gotten stuck while four-wheeling during the day and were sleeping in their vehicle. So we grabbed some firewood with the intent to replace it in the morning and walked back to camp. There were no other campsites we saw nearby when hiking earlier in the day, so we were discussing on the way back where the voices talking were coming from, but figured we just missed another nearby camp. Anyway, we are back at camp and winding down, me and one buddy taking shifts keeping the fire going and chatting a little and dozing off, and the rest of our group had headed to the tent and started sleeping. And we started hearing what we figured were coyotes or foxes. They can make weird guttural screams that sound like people. But we kept hearing footsteps around the camp and going out of our cave to check, make sure no coyotes were in camp, and never saw anything. Weird screaming persisted all night. Next day comes around and we replace the wood at the empty nearby campsite, pack up, and get ready to leave after a morning hike. It was a difficult 4-wheel trail to get out, and one of my buddies got stuck on an incline and slid back. We started trying to dig him out, and I, being at the top of the incline but in a vehicle that wouldn't help, drove up the trail to find nearby campsites and see if someone had a rig with a winch that would go quicker. I approached probably 15 campsites along the trails over a couple hours, every one of them completely empty and abandoned. The entire area had no human life. Generators, trucks, jeeps all just left at the campsite in the middle of the day. No luck, so I went back to the site. My buddy was stuck and we got him dug out in the middle of the afternoon and started to leave. The entire area on the way out was completely abandoned, tons of camps near the trailhead and literally nobody at any campsite. It became really eerie and we were trying to figure out if what we had heard the night before was actual coyotes or what. Anyway, a few days later some bodies appeared in the area in the local news. Said they had died from unknown causes. There were about 4 over the entire area we were camping. No idea if the screams we heard were people or not, and no idea where the talking was coming from to this day. Not super scary, but eerie enough.
Abnormal from the start. There used to be a lot of mining in the area. I figured it fell into one too many trail piles. So, I was sitting in my tree stand like a true fat ass, skinny, but whatever, deer hunting. It was getting late, and probably past the legal quitting time, but I was hoping that I might see something before it got too dark. I had a Winchester Model 70 in .270. I hated that gun, its back sight was folding, and tended to fold down when I needed it most. That does not factor into this story, it's just annoying. Caused me to miss a nice deer once. Location is northern Wisconsin, near the Upper Peninsula border. I am on my uncle's land, and my tree stand is overlooking a small pond that is currently frosted over. The ice is thick, we had run a 4x4 on it a few weeks ago, and it had not warmed up since. Night is falling, and as I think about a warm Irish coffee waiting for me back in the cabin, the bushes start to rustle. I tense up, hoping it's a deer, though hauling it out at this time and in the cold would suck. Out of the bushes stumbles this coyote. It was the biggest coyote I had ever seen, not as big as a wolf, but large German shepherd sized. Not bulky though. Skinny and long, really long. It looks at me, right at me, and screams. The scream nearly set my ears ringing, it was so loud.
Fucking hell. I was about to say, like, maybe it's a coy wolf. Sometimes coyotes and wolves crossbreed and come out with something like a coy wolf. They call it a coy wolf. Sort of looks like a coyote, but I think it's a bit bigger. But this thing fucking screamed. Ah!
The sound was metallic, like in the movies when a sub goes too deep, that metal bending and tearing sound. Not organic at all. I had already planned to kill it. It was late enough that I knew I would not be able to get a deer, and coyotes are a massive issue for my uncle, as they kill his chickens and sheep. As I began to place the crosshairs on them, it fell over onto its side, and screamed again. The ice cracked when it fell and hit the ice, a loud bang, as the crack spread. I felt the tree shake. In the north, when serious ice cracks, it can cause minor earthquakes, break windows and drop shelves.
What?
This ice was not that thick, but I still felt the tree move. The coyote was on its side twitching and gyrating. It then started to move onto its belly, and it got up on its hind legs.
Cracking ice causing an earthquake? I've never heard of such a thing. That's wild.
It looked right at me and screamed. My ears were ringing after that last one, but I don't think I heard any wildlife. I feel like I did not, but that might be my memories being edited by these threads. It stood on its back legs for a second or two, then fell forwards, onto its front legs. It then got up again, and took a few unsteady steps towards me. It was awkward, like if you were trying to get your dog to dance, or teaching a cat to walk on its back legs. It kind of stabilized itself, and began walking towards me, hissing like a radio. At that point, I was a little weirded out, but I thought it might have rabies or mad cow or something, so I placed my crosshairs on its head, and squeezed the trigger. Its head was split open by the 180-grain soft point, and it dropped. The shot was a little high, but it was pink misted, a fact I could see on the snow around it. I figured that was that, and started to climb down from the stand when it screamed again. I flew up the steps I had descended, and placed another bead on it. This one went into its throat, and it fell. I placed a third round into its chest for good measure, and slowly walked down. As I got closer, and my ears recovered, it was still hissing and trying to move. I raised my rifle, but it died before I placed a fourth round. Looking closer, it was all kinds of screwed up. It had the thin, almost needle-like teeth in the front, but its back teeth were shovel-like and flat, with really thin edges. Sharp. Its front paws hand thing, elongated toes, with sharp claws, while its back feet were long, wide, and flat. Snout was much longer than a normal coyote, maybe 1.5 times as long, and its eyes were much larger. I told my family, and we took a hunk of spine that was exposed to send to the Department of Natural Resources. They tested it, and it came back negative for all common diseases. Don't know what it was, probably a mutated coyote that bred with a dog or something, but it was strange. Glad it's dead, that's for sure. It's the strangest thing I have seen in these north woods.
Be me. Be 14.
Loves you too, honey kitty. The shirt's supposed to be black, right? Oh shit. Fucking sneeze tease. Damn it. Damn it. It's cool as is.
Tennessee. I have a grandfather who lives out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods that are thick. Visit him every month or so. Have to lock up all the doors at night because he's paranoid, including the one outside to the garage. It'll probably help to give you guys an idea of how this part of the house is set up. There's a patio that encircles the entire house, like 4 foot wide, but wider and thicker in front of the kitchen. Most of the back wall in the kitchen is a set of sliding glass doors. Patio in front of them connects to the garage, and by extension, the garage door. If you keep going to the right from there, you get to the back porch. If anyone wants more elaboration, just ask. But that's really all that's important. Like I said, all the doors have to be locked at night. My brother and I went out through the kitchen to lock the garage. We lock it, he walks over to the back porch to piss. Hear movement in the woods. Assume it's a bobcat we've been seeing and hearing for a while. We get really quiet to see if we can spot it. Trees are literally pitch black. I can't see shit, Captain. The sound has completely stopped. Hear this ungodly screech 100-ish yards out in the forest. We nope back inside. Back up there, don't remember the time difference. Maybe a month later. After dinner. Grandfather has retired to the living room. Mom and sister are cleaning up. Brother and I are wandering around and being generally useless. Look out the sliding glass door. See this pale face that's almost human but not quite at the edge of the tree line. I can't see anything else. Holy heck. JPEG. Freak the hell out. Brother looks and sees it too right as it disappears. Mom and sister look at me instead of outside, don't see it. I distinctly remember this next one was 2 months after that last one. Watching TV after everyone else has gone to bed. Decide to get something to drink. Go into the kitchen, see face again, same place. Freeze and go silent as it disappears. Run upstairs to the bedroom. Didn't turn off the TV or get my drink.
What color are the shoes?
Be this may. Go back up to grandfather's. Being a layabout. I realized I left my headphones in the car. Walk over to the kitchen to go out to car. There it is. It's standing about halfway between the house and the tree line, clearly visible in the porch light. On all fours. Body is the same color as the face. It stands up really awkwardly, like it's not quite sure how. Nope.gif.jpeg.png.webm. I watch it turn back towards the woods. All of a sudden it's gone. Don't sleep all night. Keep hearing that screech way far off in the woods. Also hear occasional thumps downstairs and catch whiffs of a coppery scent. Too much of a coward to go outside or look out the window. I haven't seen it since.
Probably like 18. Me, my sister, and 3 male friends of mine decide we want to go to this abandoned mental institution on Long Island for some creepiness and urbex. Lash a flashlight to a stickball bat to have protection from any manner of assailant, be they mortal or corporeal. Live in Queens, so the 5 of us have to take the Long Island Expressway to get out there. On the highway, Highway to Hell, by AC/DC comes on, too spooky but not enough to deter us. Get lost for hours, ask 2 Li Hicks at a gas station to give us directions, finally find the place. Have to drive through this eerie backwoods road to get there, forest on both sides of the road uncomfortably close. All of a sudden you pop out of the forest on this wide road separated by a central sidewalk. All there is a tiny decrepit fire department, some kind of residence. Possibly for the elderly, and it was the creepiest looking building I've ever seen, maybe 6 stories high and old. Kings Park is the name of the place. So we cruise past the decrepit old hospital and pull into that residence home I mentioned, put just into the parking lot to park. My friends exit and stretch while I gather my shit. Go around the car to get stickball bat contraption, place the key in the trunk keyhole, turn. Car alarm starts going off like crazy. This has happened to me before with this shitty old Infiniti, but the noise is bound to call attention to us, and we're right beside the residence. Put the key back in the ignition because that's the only way to stop the alarm. What are you doing here? Nope, nope, nope. Avi. Look down the parking lot through the thick-ass fog and there's this old lady just on the edge of vision near the residence home. Just having car trouble, she probably knows what we're up to. Creepy old lady starts advancing toward our car. Sister and friends pile in as I mess with the ignition, the key refuses to stop the alarm. All of a sudden it works, the alarm stops, I start the car and boogie on out of there. And that's the story of how I never went to that old abandoned mental institution.
Always hear noises like gunshots and loud cracks when falling asleep. Make me jump bad, but fall asleep eventually. Be in a rented house at uni. Noises haven't happened for a few days. Wake up and lay in bed before rolling onto my back and trying to sleep again. Hear a scream. Scream is like nothing I have ever heard before, like somebody is screaming at the top of their lungs. Humans can directionalize sound pretty well.
Oh, that's the wrong boy?
Every
Damn.
instinct tells me that
What
this
color's
sound
the hair?
came from about 10 centimeters in front of my face.
Oh, is it
Like somebody was over me in the bed screaming. Instinctively start hitting and pushing it away. Nothing there. Screaming doesn't stop. Carries on for a full 20 seconds. I'm almost sobbing, have curled into a ball in the corner of my bed with my hands over my ears. For a few seconds I can hear it despite having my ears covered. It stops. Never been so scared in my life. Since that morning I've been getting the random cracks and gunshot noises while awake, instead of in bed. Hear it walking down the street or sitting at a table. People think I'm a spaz, because I flinch at noises they don't hear. Happens for a few months. Walking down the road and hearing what sounds like a gunshot next to my head. Literally jump away from it. Into oncoming traffic. Avoid getting full-on hit by a car as it swerves and brakes and clips me with its wing mirror. Still happens all the time. Started to think I was schizo for a while.
Okay guys, this happened a long time ago, so I'll try. Be me. Be like 10 or 12. Sleep.jpg. 2 or 3 in the morning. Wake up to take a piss. Got the unusual habit of looking out the window in the night. When I look out the window, there's the parking lot and the gate of the residential and the gatekeeper. Look at the cars.jpg. When I see a creepy silhouette beneath a car, like he was hiding something or someone. At first I thought that he was the lover of some old...
I had to reread what you wrote. It's like, my first thought was like, oh, I drew the ears in the wrong place? No. And then after rereading it again, it was like, oh wait, oh. All right. I get what you're saying.
Woman in the neighborhood, or worse, a thief. I see what he'll do. GIF. I spent 30 minutes watching the guy and he did not move more than a meter or 2. Wanted to see what the guy was going to do, but at least one sound would frighten him. Wait. Then the shit goes weird. The guy started to move up and down like he was lost, making some noise that even from my room I could hear. But the question is why the gatekeeper didn't hear it being so near the cars. I kept watching him when I laid down in the window, making a big crack sound. I'm so dead. JPEG. He stared at me and I tried to hide, but when I looked again he was still looking at my window. Indeed, I'm so dead. JPEG. He freezes and stands still beneath the car. I noticed he was pitch black, like he was wearing a black latex full costume. The light was on him, as still as a statue, no eyes, no mouth, very skinny, staring at me for 2 minutes more. Then he ran up my neighborhood a few houses more. My neighborhood is like a little hill. I panicked because my house door is in the same way he ran, took a knife from my previous dinner in my room and a Bible, very Christian at the time. I closed and locked every room in my house and just waited. After leaving my room and checking the other ones, I go to the living room to check the door. Fine, lock, safe, and nobody seems to be inside of the house. That was close. JPEG. Then, sure of myself, I disposed to take a look at the windows. Window number 1. Okay. Window number 2. Holy shit. When I approached my second window, he punched it like he was trying to break through the window. I backed up and took my knife full of courage and piss, grabbed my Bible and hit the window with it, hoping something holy happens. Didn't work as expected. JPEG. My second chance was to falcon punch my window with a knife, grab my courage back from the floor, took the knife and stabbed the window with it. I hope it works. GIF. I assume the guy backed up because I didn't hear any other noise in and outside my house. I spent the whole night looking at my TV with my good old knife and Bible, then I fall asleep. The next day I asked my mother and my grandma if they didn't hear any weird noise. No, they said, must be a nightmare, said my mom. Even later in the day I asked the gatekeeper if he didn't hear or see anything weird by that time, and he told me he didn't see anything at that time. I obviously refused to think that it was a nightmare. I woke up at the same hour the next night, and to my big surprise he wasn't there. I looked at all the parking lot, even the gatekeeper was walking around. Nothing happened that night, same as the next one. I tried to forget it by the time, but a few years later I remembered about it and I kept quiet all this time. Not even my family believes me, a part of my great-grandma. For the others, I'm a fool. Trying to accept the idea that it was all a nightmare, that I fell asleep on the couch and it was all a dream, but I always refused to think that it was a nightmare. But why I was the only one who heard it, why I was the only one who saw it. I asked my great-grandma what was all about. Obviously, being an old Latin woman, she told me it was a demon trying to get a man or woman to possess, that I was in danger of getting possessed. That's why only I knew it happened. I don't believe in that crap. What was that shit? What was all about?
Told this before.
What? You don't believe in demons, yet you thought you could like fucking punch a window with a Bible and hope something magical would happen? Idiot.
We'll tell again. Freshman in college. My cousin also goes to the same school. He has a girlfriend who told us one night after drinks that her house is possessed by a demon or something. All of us laugh and call immediate bullshit, assume overactive imaginings of drunk dumb girl. She says we can go to her house the next night to see proof. The next day we arrived, 4 of us, 2 men, 2 women. Her parents were staying out of town. The house was nice, like a newly built McMansion in development. As soon as we arrive, notice all lights are on, even push lights in closets. I think this is weird given that her parents have been gone for at least a night now and wouldn't leave lights on. She asks if we want a beer. We do. Go into the kitchen. Refrigerator door is open, all the cabinets are open. Immediate feelings of unease all around, but rationalize that she had someone do this to freak us. She goes out to the garage, which is connected to kitchen, to get beers from a fridge out there. After she comes back, she starts closing all drawers and cabinets, etc., leaves the fridge open. The face when I realize they have to keep their food in the garage because the fridge and cabinets always open themselves whenever nobody is in kitchen. See broken plate on ground, start to pick it up, but she gives me a firm no, stating that it'd just break another one, leave it. We all are uneasy now. The house is cold, big and empty, aside from us. She shows us a freaking butcher knife that is stuck in the wall in the dining room, takes it out, puts it on the table. Says she has some scratches under one of her windows, could be spoopy. Do we want to check it out? Go upstairs, look at some mediocre scratches under her window. go back downstairs, knife is back in the wall, all the cabinets open again. At this point we've had a few beers, we're feeling uneasy but loving it, sort of. This time she drops a bomb, saying that the basement is the epicenter of this activity and nobody has been able to go down past midnight. Can't make it past the 6th step. Immediate acceptance of the challenge. Too chicken shit to attempt alone, so cousin and I will do it together, side by side. As we open the basement door, an immediate burst of cool, fresh air comes rushing up at us from the darkness, enough to blow hair back. First step, nothing. The second step, starting to feel oppressive I think is the word, like a pressure pushing us back. Looking into the dark it almost seemed to get darker. Third step, a light hanging from a cord down in the basement clicks on, that's all. Silence. We remain on this step for a few minutes debating on continuing, starting to become immensely scared. Fourth step, the light begins to swing in circles, like someone is swinging it around. Fifth step, grinding sounds coming from the back of the basement, like metal on concrete. Sixth step. The step. We are fully brick shitting at this moment. A loud bang as a paint can come sailing from the dark, smashes into the wall in front of us, paint everywhere. At this point we want to touch step 7 and go, as fast as we can, but as we are pushing our feet down towards the steps, it was as if an air pocket or something was sitting on the step. It was like pressing your feet down into jello or something. At this point I yelled something to the effect of, "Hey, you can't stop us from touching this step." At that moment the proverbial rug was pulled out from under us as the air pocket collapsed. We slam our feet into the steps with such force we both went down, taking each other with us. Sliding down steps towards the bottom, almost could say was being pulled. Scrambling to get up, cousin yells out in pain. As we get near the top, both of us say that we heard our names growling at us from the basement. Cousin has large scratches on his back, almost animalistic. We all freak out as soon as we cross the steps, slam the door shut and sort of freeze. All terrified, loud footsteps run up steps and slam into the door. We freak out, this is the nope moment for me, all run out of the house and just leave. Cousin ends up breaking up with this girl after this, we all sort of had mini breakdowns. The girl's house burnt down about a month later. Her parents got investigated for burning their own house down because the cause of ignition was that the gas line had been pulled away from a water heater in the basement. True shit, changed my life and those involved.
It happened back in August 1998.
No,
We were camping in some woods off of Middle Run Road in Fairmount City, Pennsylvania. The area we were in was isolated. Back then it was a path off of a logging road. We set up camp and got our fire going. We felt spooked, like we were being watched. But we played that off to being in the woods. Everything was fine that night, so we planned on staying Saturday night, too. We still felt spooked that night. When it started to turn daylight, we heard a lot of cracking and snapping sounds. We were in the tent, so we just stayed put, being really quiet. I was laying at the side of the tent, my head against the tent side. When these things came to the site, they were talking back and forth. It sounded like little animals chattering back and forth. They got quiet and we thought they were gone. When I moved my pillow and pushed it harder against the tent, something smacked the tent right above my head and took off back into the woods. Of course we were terrified, but we thought that it was a person trying to scare us. At this time my husband and I weren't married yet, and we just really wanted to spend time together. So we went back to the spot to camp the next weekend. But we brought friends. One of his friends brought a .22 with them. We pulled into the camping spot again. For this to make sense, I need to describe the area we pulled into. One side was a 20-foot cliff down onto the ground. The other side was a thick line of pine trees. Behind the trees is a field, then more woods. We were unloading and my friend said they felt like we were being watched. I said I always feel like that, it's creepy in these woods. They didn't know about the previous events. Everyone was at the trunk getting ready to move everything down the hill, and a huge black shadow came out behind us and ran straight off the cliff. Everyone was so scared, we jumped back into the car and left for a while. We knew we had to go back or go home. So we went back before it got too dark to set up the tent. After a while, everyone started to relax and have fun. When it got dark, someone thought they saw someone digging in the car. The guys went up, and that same huge shadow took off again. Most of us were too scared to go back up to the car. I look back on that and wonder why. Haha, the tent was not a safe place. We all went to sleep in the tent. That's when we heard that same chattering between the things again. The friend that brought the gun unzipped the tent a little bit and fired the gun. Nothing ran, but it got quiet. After a few minutes the creatures were talking again. He yelled, "We're going to fire at you if you don't leave us alone." Whatever it was left out a scary roar growl noise, and the other thing chattered louder. We fired the gun and ran like hell to the car. We left and slept in the car. When we went back in the morning, the food was left untouched. The tent area with the sleeping bags was ransacked. We left everything, the tent, the sleeping bags, the food, and never went back to collect it. There is some kind of creature in those woods.
My story takes place back in the winter of 2009. I was 15 years old at the time. There were these woods by my house that my friends and I used to spend a lot of time in. These woods were massive. If you didn't know your way around, it would be easy to get lost in them. But it was at this point in my teen years, when most of my friends lost interest in spending time in the woods. But I, on the other hand, always enjoyed being in nature. And as a result, I was spending a lot of time by myself in these woods. If I remember correctly, it was a cold and dreary day in February. I was walking through the woods, listening to my MP3 player and smoking a cigarette. But then out of nowhere, I noticed something moving around in the distance. At first I thought it was maybe a deer or some sort of animal. But then as I took a closer look, I noticed it wasn't an animal, it was a person. Now one thing I should mention is, these woods were well known for being isolated and vastly empty, void of all humans. Aside from my friends and I, not once did I ever encounter another human being in the area. Instead of running away, turning around, or walking in the opposite direction for whatever reason, I wasn't afraid, and decided to approach this random mysterious person. I took off my headphones and shouted, "Hey you!" What would happen next would shock me to the core. I came face to face with the creepiest old lady I've ever seen in my life. She had thick, wild, and frizzy gray hair. She was wearing what looked like a brown coat, along with a dark blue dress underneath. And along with that, she was wearing what looked like sandals. The weather outside was far too cold for sandals. I immediately got a bad vibe from her. I took a few steps back. Nervously, for whatever reason, I said, "Oh hey, I was just passing through." I honestly didn't know what else to say. This lady had the most frightening face I've ever seen. I'm not trying to sound mean, but she looked like some sort of demon. Her eyes were wide open and bulging out of her head. She looked like she was high on meth or something. She then began aggressively sprinting towards me and yelling in a somewhat creature-like manner. For an old lady, she certainly had some impressive running abilities. I began running as fast as I possibly could in the opposite direction.
Oh, welcome to the chat.
But surprisingly, she managed to keep up with me.
Gail,
And trust me, at age 15, I was a super fast runner.
I'll just call you
Then, for whatever reason,
J-
I randomly decided to climb up a tree in order to get away from her.
J.E.
I climbed up the tree as high as I possibly could. Down below, this creepy old lady attempted to climb up the tree, but failed to do so. I screamed at her, saying things like, "What do you want? Leave me alone." I really didn't know what to do. Me and this old lady proceeded to stare at each other for about an hour. She had a terrifying look in her eyes, as if she was possessed. I'll never forget that look. She looked like she wanted to kill me. She kept making strange sounds, and I noticed that most of her teeth looked rotten, and many were missing. But then, out of nowhere, there was a noise in some nearby bushes, and she went aggressively running towards it. Her behavior was almost zombie-like. But this gave me a chance to run away. I climbed down out of the tree, ran as fast as I could out of the woods, and returned home. The next day, I told my friends about what had happened, but they didn't believe me. We went searching for the lady, but couldn't find her. What baffled me was what was an old lady doing in the middle of the woods? Where did she come from? Why was she running after me? What happened to her? To this day, there are still so many unanswered questions. But even till this very day, I can still see her face in my mind. Her face actually haunts me. And that encounter is what created my fear of creepy old ladies.
A moth. I'm
This
not gonna
happened
kill
while
a
I was
moth.
doing my army service in Switzerland in the Alps.
I like moths.
I am not allowed to talk about what we were doing, but I'll try to keep things clear. My company had installed a huge antenna and it had to be guarded by 2 soldiers day and night. We were
Oh,
on top
I
of
am?
a hill, far away from any city and near a huge forest.
How's that?
It was 1800 hours and I had just started
let
my
me
watch of 6 hours with another
Turn
soldier.
this down.
Everything went
Is
fine.
that better?
We smoked cigarettes and kept ourselves occupied until our watch ended at midnight. Then, we received a call from our superior and he told us that one of the soldiers that was supposed to take the watch couldn't come and one of us had to stay for
I
another
feel like
watch
I'm a
of
little
6
too loud
hours.
now.
We tossed a coin to know who will stay from midnight to 6 in the morning with temperatures of negative
All right,
20
cool.
Celsius degrees. Of course I lost and I had to wait for the other soldier to come and join me for the night watch. They sent another soldier, but not the best because I knew he would sleep all night when I saw him climbing the hill with his sleeping bag. And that's what he did. He immediately took place in the tent and fell asleep. It was the coldest and longest night of my life, but nothing special about it. The weird part happened in the morning. We received another call from our superior and he told us that we had an NBC exercise. It means that we have to wear all day long our anti-chemical suit. I don't know the English word for it, the one with a gas mask and everything that goes with it. I was really upset and exhausted because I wasn't able to sleep with that thing on and sleep was my only reward for that
Hazmat
12-hour
suit?
watch. Well, I got out of the tent and this is where I saw something that still scares me to this day. There was a woman standing next to the antenna and she wasn't moving. She was just standing there, 5 meters from the tent. I couldn't see her face because of the sun starting to rise behind her. I knew she was a woman because she had really long hair and she had curves. Remember that we were in the middle of nowhere and this
fucking
lady was
tits.
standing there, not moving like she was frozen. I started to freak out and I called the other guy to show him what I was looking at. I don't know why, but he wasn't scared at all and he told her to leave because she wasn't allowed there. But she didn't make a move. She just stood there looking at us, or at least in our direction. I was so confused, how a woman could ignore 2 soldiers telling her to leave a forbidden area. I mean, we are in Switzerland, the army is not that impressive, I know, but people usually don't do this kind of thing. They would just move away, especially when it's 6 in the morning. And what was she doing in the middle of nowhere, obviously not dressed for this cold weather? How long was she standing there and how did she end up here? I didn't hear any footsteps. So many questions went through my mind at that moment. The other soldier didn't think twice and started walking towards her. When he almost reached her, she started running very fast. She ran directly into the forest. I saw her getting deep down in the forest and she disappeared from our sight. I'm really a rational thinker, I question everything and think that there is always an explanation. For me, the explanation is that she was simply a jogger because of the way she ran to the forest. But, almost 3 minutes had passed between the first time I saw her and the moment she started running away. 3 minutes of not moving at all, looking at me, dressed with something really tight with negative 20 degrees and in the middle of nowhere. Thank God there was someone with me because nobody would have believed me.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
Stickman entities? The hell is a stickman?
Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This occurred in April 2019, warm and clear midday. The location was a walled garden, empty 1940s rough guest converted cottages in southeast England about an hour out of London. I was working in property maintenance, but did garden design for friends and family, now do it full-time. A family friend was paying me in kind to redesign the garden of a property they'd recently renovated. I made the job into a mini break. Basically, it was a secret garden within a bigger walled garden. Completely overgrown, wisteria and ivy covered every wall with the mature shrubs encroaching onto the paths and gravel. Tall mature trees cast the whole property in shade. I was using a hoe to clear back some of the shrubs and ivy so I could define the path, which converged on a vista at the back of the garden which looked out onto fields and a wooded hill. I'd missed it the first time, but as I walked back I noticed a little secret garden behind a big wooden door. The only reason I clocked it was that there was a sound of what I'd assumed were bees or wasps. It took a grand push, but the door eventually gave way. I had to duck to get in. First thing, I got hit with a smell like rotten mushrooms, plus a shower of brick dust and dried vegetable matter fell on me as I passed through the threshold. The little private garden was about 12 feet by 20 feet, walled in red brick with a yew or box hedge at the back. First thing I see is directly in front of me a load of pots of varying sizes filled with dead shrubs and various weeds, ivy and such. I'd expected to see a beehive or something, so I was looking left and right, and that's when I saw this thing. There was a big old beech tree with a stone bench in front, and on it was what looked like a big swat of ivy, saplings or canes in an upright mass bundle. At this point I realized whatever is nesting on this bundle aren't bees. I don't know what they were, but they looked more like beetles. And so the more I'm concentrating, the more I can see this thing as a humanoid. Legs, arms, and something like a head but no face, and the proportions weren't human. If I had to guess a height, maybe 6 feet 5 or 10 seconds later the stickman starts moving, gets up just like a person, and in what must have been 2 or 3 seconds it pushed off away from me in the direction of the hedge. I can't truly convey just how terrified I was in that moment when the penny dropped and I registered what I was looking at. Instinct just took over at that point, and I don't recall a huge amount, just that my heart jumped into my mouth and I nearly threw up. So I'm waving my hand out back behind me to the doorway, and as soon as I felt the brickwork in one motion I ducked out into the main garden and hurried back to the house. It took me 20 minutes or so to compose myself, during which time I typed out a few text messages about what happened, which I didn't send while looking out at the garden from the conservatory. I was going over what it could have been, trying to calm down, rationalize. Later I tentatively returned, having convinced myself it was nothing. I can't quite recall what I'd rationalized it as at the time, but I had an idea it had been a deer or some animal which had made a den there. But I knew this wasn't the case, and checking the garden confirmed this. The hedge at the back was solid. I used a hoe to try and find a hole to no avail. The mass that made up the humanoid was gone completely, no vines or twig pile left. The insect swarm that I saw covering the thing had dispersed. Up until very recently I'd forced myself to accept it was just the way the light fell on the tree, that maybe there had been a deer and it had squeezed through the hedge, but as I say above, having recently gotten into cryptozoology by chance, the facade I created has started cracking. Having wrote this, I'm still not sure what I saw.
My dad, brother, and I were playing badminton one evening, early 2020 in southern Minnesota, when my brother tapped me on my shoulder and pointed down our driveway at the field. I saw what looked like an extremely tall, white, thin, stick figure running through the farm field. It was running, from our point of view, from left to right with a slight diagonal somewhat towards us. It was running so cartoony. It's hard to explain. It was taking overly exaggerated bounds, and it was running fast. Even though it was 700-ish feet away from us, I could tell it was unrealistically tall and fast. I remember watching it put one leg out in front of the other, and its arms doing that thing people do when they sprint. I couldn't see the details because of how far away we were, but it looked like you were to draw a stick figure. Like Slender Man forgot his suit. It quickly disappeared from sight, and the trees that surround our property obstructed our view. Both my brother and I ran down the driveway so we could keep our eyes on it. So now we stood at the end of our driveway looking around at all the farm fields, but it was just gone. Even with how fast it was going, there was no way it could have gone over the horizon in the amount of time it took us to get a better view. Eventually, my dad joined up with us at the end of the driveway. We told him what we saw, and he thought it might have been a plastic bag blowing in the wind. Except it wasn't windy at all, That's why we were playing badminton. But it's not uncommon to see garbage blowing across the farm fields out here. Is there an explanation for this? Has anyone else seen something similar?
It was dusk and I was in my 30s videoing my kids playing outside on my phone. It was getting dark, so I stopped the video and looked out past my kids into a small field behind them. I saw a very tall, super skinny, slender man type thing, all black with long swinging arms, and it was taking big steps but walking toward a tree line in my parents' rural home. It was cartoon-like and stick figure-like in proportions, but walked very fluidly. I grew up there and never saw this, but have seen shadow people and weird occurrences my whole life there. My sister, who was watching the kids next to me, was looking out at the same area I was. She saw something at the same time, but described it as something on the ground crawling unnaturally. I turned to her to see if she was seeing what I was seeing, and she said,
"What was that?"
She was just staring, trying to wrap her brain around it. When I looked back, it was gone. I told her what I saw, and she said that's not what she saw, but we both saw something at the same time in the same area. I'm more sensitive than her seeing things like this, but this was her first time seeing anything. She immediately ushered the kids inside, and was very shook. She won't talk about it, she's still terrified. My teen daughter, whom I was filming, said she looked at both of us and our expressions and knew something was very wrong, so she turned to see what we were looking at, but didn't see anything. I will say, it didn't scare me, it was just hard to understand what I was seeing. That was about 8 years ago. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, my young teen nieces were outside playing at the same house and saw a fedora-wearing shadow on the tree line in the same area. My one niece is very sensitive and saw the full figure of a dark shadow with a hat. The other never saw anything paranormal before and described it as a weird dark figure on the ground. They both said it was very black. I've seen shadow people in the house before and interacted with one once, not that I wanted to. Here's the strange thing about all the things I've seen at this house my whole life. Every single entity and mist I've seen inside and outside of the house has been moving in the same direction, always toward the tree line in this one area by the long driveway. The very weird thing is, several people over the years, who are not believers in the paranormal, have told me they hear deep growling in the same tree line at night when they are alone.
I'm going to try and report this with as little dramatic flair as possible, because it seems like people sometimes get carried away with the storytelling when reporting something like this, and I want to avoid that if I can. This happened a long time ago and not even in America, occurring on a hill in Scotland named Arthur's Seat near Edinburgh. But for the first time the other day I was discussing it and suddenly realized that it actually involves 3 of the major factors associated with a lot of the missing 411 cases: a body of water, a dog behaving extremely unusually, and large amounts of granite. I was in my mid-teens at the time, and due to unusual circumstances my dad had woken me up in the middle of the night to walk the dog with him and have a chat. It was around 2 a.m. It was a full moon and a very bright night with great visibility. The skies were clear and we were walking on a granite hill, an extinct volcano in fact, that has a valley in the middle with a lochen, a small lake in it. We had walked around the lochen before starting up the side of the valley towards the ridge with the dog on a leash. As we began to approach the top of the slope, the dog stopped dead and point-blank refused to come any further in the direction we were walking. He was literally a dead weight on the leash and we would have had to bodily drag him to move him even an inch further forward. We realized that he'd tucked his tail between his legs, was visibly shaking, and was in a curled crouch, making himself as small as possible. He was also entirely fixated on something ahead of us that we hadn't noticed or paid attention to beforehand. It appeared to be a straight black line emerging vertically from the ground. I remember thinking at first that it was a plastic tube they used to protect vulnerable saplings from deer. In the first moments that we became aware of it, there were no discernible features whatsoever other than a black vertical bar. As we watched, the straight black bar unfurled into the crude shape of a humanoid, I estimate to have been around 8 feet tall. Unfurled is the best term I can think of to describe this process. If you've ever seen a butterfly emerge from a chrysalis, it was something like that. The figure was entirely jet black, there were no visible features or contrast within it to any degree despite the bright moonlight, and black doesn't cover how dark this thing actually was. It was what I imagine a black hole might look like, and although the figure itself wasn't remotely transparent or insubstantial, the outline was slightly fuzzy or blurred, almost like something that's vibrating extremely quickly or a washing machine on a high spin cycle. It did not have human proportions. It was almost like a child's drawing of a stickman, but with disproportionately long arms and legs. If you are imagining something like a stick insect made out of the material vantablack and in the rough shape of a person, you're close to the mark. The head was unusually small, and I remember the top of the head being somewhat flat, although my dad doesn't. In every other respect, our recollections of the event are identical. This all happened within probably under a minute, and then it turned and faced us. I'm not going to give a melodramatic description, and in fact words can't really do it justice. Although it lacked any features whatsoever that might be identified as eyes or a face, you could feel this thing's attention on you. Instantly every hair on my body stood erect and I broke out in goosebumps. I turned to my dad and said, "Dad, what the F is that thing?" He's one of the most skeptical and level-headed people I know, so what really freaked me out was that his answer was just,
I don't know. We need to get out of here right now.
As a young man, being able to detect genuine fear in my dad's voice was itself quite unsettling. We immediately began to walk sideways away from the figure so as not to entirely turn our backs on it. The minute we began moving away, it was like a spell was broken on the dog, who began to literally drag us. The figure followed us for more than 5 minutes, maintaining the same distance. It walked with large, slow, deliberate strides, and I remember its arms swung in long arcs as it moved. At no point did it show any sign of aggression. It simply followed, maintaining the same distance from us the entire time. It was perfectly and completely silent. There wasn't a sound when it was following us. We were in a highly adrenalized state during this pursuit, and the atmosphere was extremely tense. We exchanged very few words other than whispers like, "Is it still following us? And don't look at it." It never even crossed our minds to run, which in hindsight seems unusual given that neither of us even entertains the possibility that this was just another person out for a walk. In the moment, we both had an almost literally overwhelming sense of wrongness about the situation. After about 5 minutes I stopped. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines, "This is completely insane. WTF is going on? What is that thing?" When we stopped, it stopped, and again just turned to stand facing us straight on. Because of the total lack of features, it may as well have been facing directly away from us, but like I say, there was a very definite physical sense of when this thing's awareness was focused on you. We stood in total silence. The dog continued trying to drag us away. It stood motionless for a minute or two, and then, as we watched, it turned, sank down into the solid ground, and disappeared. Immediately it felt like some sort of charge in the air had dissipated, and we began power walking back to the car. When we got back, we were still buzzing with adrenaline and woke everyone up to tell them what we'd seen. That's the story. I can't really add anything else that wouldn't just be dramatic flourishes for storytelling purposes. The dog's behavior was extremely uncharacteristic of him. If we had encountered another person under the same circumstances, there's not a doubt in my mind that he would have been barking and straining on his leash to approach them rather than get away. That's partly why he was on a lead, but also because he was a rescue and very prone to chasing animals and disappearing for 20 minutes or so. We were both quite shaken, as neither of us could really come up with any plausible rational explanation for what we'd experienced. Occasionally, over the years, people have suggested this was a broken specter where our own shadows were being cast by the moon on a fog bank or low cloud. But I can't accept this explanation. There just wasn't any fog or clouds present, and visibility was excellent due to both clear air and the bright moonlight. I have no real theories about what we saw, and nor does my dad. Although I still consider myself to be a naturally skeptical person, this completely shattered my ability to dismiss other people's stories of high strangeness and wild theories, even those that at face value seem absurd. I can hardly laugh in someone's face when they say that they think Bigfoot is real but comes from another dimension, for example, or that something otherworldly is taking people in the wilderness. Although obviously I have no reason to believe this was Bigfoot, and the incident occurred in Scotland. Years after the fact, and years ago now, I found a thread on a bushcraft forum where people were discussing spooky experiences in the outdoors, and to my amazement there was a hunter who reported seeing the exact same thing crossing a clearing in the woods from a hunting hide during a full moon in America. I don't have a link because this was a long time ago, but they reported identical details: the small head, the long arms that moved in pendulous arcs when it walked, the slow deliberate stride, the total blackness and lack of features, and even the fuzzy outline that they described in exactly the same way, as if it was vibrating. Make of this what you will. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything, and I'm not married to any particular theory about what we saw. I just thought it was worth reporting here when I realized that the hill was mostly composed of granite, connected that with the water in the lake. I want to briefly touch on two of the more obvious explanations for what we experienced and why I struggle to accept them, but first, because it's relevant to one of them, let me mention that there are at least some caves on this hill, and that they've been associated with spooky stuff before, although I didn't know this at the time. In 1836, a group of schoolboys found a small entrance to a previously unknown cave on the hill near where this occurred that contained 17 miniature coffins containing what we would describe today as voodoo dolls, and some of them are still on display in the Scottish National Museum today. Now for the rational explanations. We were hallucinating. The dog's strange behavior was caused by something unrelated but in the unfamiliar environment. In the dark, we entered some kind of adrenalized state where our minds projected a tangible threat onto an unexpected object, possibly actually one of those tubes used to protect trees I mentioned earlier, and we both hallucinated the same thing. I find this hard to accept because of the specific details we both recalled afterwards. Long arms, small head, vibrating outline, slow deliberate stride, swinging arms, strong sense of when its attention was focused on you. Despite not actually talking about what we were seeing at the time, and also that the dog was very clearly focused on the same thing as we were and absolutely terrified. It was exactly what it appeared to be. A very unusually tall being emaciated to the verge of death that was vibrating. In this scenario, they would have emerged from a hole in the ground, remembered the cave, and were shivering from the cold. They then followed us in silence before descending back underground via another hole. I can almost accept this, and that due to adrenaline our brains interpreted it as being more dramatically strange than it actually was. The only thing that's maybe worth adding is that this event seemed to flick some switch in my head that made me no longer remotely afraid of the dark under any circumstances. You'd think it would have gone the other way, and I'm not LARPing as a vampire or some possessed creature of the night, but I worked in a bakery at the time and walked to work along a river in a deep valley in the middle of the night. Sometimes it was pitch black to the extent that you would have to feel your way ahead with your hands, and I'm not ashamed to admit that sometimes I'd get a bit spooked, especially when a fox suddenly screamed right next to you. After this event, never again. I can walk through the deepest, darkest forest, abandoned building, or mine in complete darkness without feeling the slightest trepidation since this incident, and I don't really know why, but it's to the extent that people have commented on it. I don't know how you can do that. Now, not being afraid of the dark is hardly a superpower, but for me it has always been a markedly less intimidating experience after this encounter, and I really can't rationalize why, because it seems like it would make so much more sense for it to have instilled a fear of the dark rather than removed it. That's all I have to say. In the unlikely event that you've seen the same thing, please let me know. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer, but I don't think I've left anything relevant out.
OMG, I saw a stickman entity last year. I had never heard of this before. It was about 9:30 p.m., and I had my 2 dogs out and we were walking back up the driveway to my house when they both started barking, looking down the street. I looked, and 3 houses down there was a black stick figure zipping up and down my neighbor's driveway. It seemed to snow. I saw it and it stopped, then started heading our way. I immediately got panicky when I saw it, and dragged the dogs into the house. I was terrified. I turned out all the lights and I kept looking out the window, feeling like it had come into the yard. Thank God I never saw it again. The dogs saw it first, which validates for me it wasn't my imagination. I saw it after they started barking at it. It was only about 4 or 5 feet tall. I'm bad at measurements by sight, but it was extremely frightening. It wasn't walking, it was gliding very fast, almost robotic. I hope I never see it again.
I saw a stickman entity when I was a kid through the door hole in my parents' flat. I was going to elementary school, so this must have happened in the early to mid-90s. Possibly around 1993 to 1995. This happened in Turkey, in the city of Izmir. It was a sunny afternoon in April and I was waiting for my friend to come and play PC games together. I heard a sound coming from the apartment's corridor and thought my friend had arrived. Went to the door to peek through the door hole. I saw a stickman-like figure standing in front of our neighbor's door. It was not black. It looked like it was made out of clean light brown wood. It had black spheres for hands, feet, and head. Visually, its body, limbs, and the black spheres were identical to giant matchsticks in color and proportion. Even weirder, it was wearing a yellowish fedora hat with transparent dark fabric hanging from the edges. I could still see that it had no facial features through the thin fabric. I was very confused but kept watching it, and it did not move for about 5 seconds. Then it made a slightly quick wavy movement with its arms, like the motion is carried from one arm to the other, and that scared me off. My mom was at home, so I ran to her and told her that there's something in the apartment. We saw nothing when we checked back. Later I discarded it as an optical illusion since I saw this through the door hole. Maybe there was some dirt or a bug with long legs on the door hole lens. Years later I found out about the stickman, hat man, and shadow people phenomenon, and that really creeped me out. Below is an illustration I made of the entity I saw that day.
I want to see.
So I saw a stick
Ah,
figure.
missed it.
That day.
Shit, they don't even show it.
So I saw a stick figure traveling back roads on the coast of North Carolina in a city called Cape Carteret. It was around 2030. I distinctly remember
I
looking
was
at my radio for
munching
the time a few minutes prior to
cinnamon
seeing the
roll
entity. I rounded a bend
with
going 80
icing,
kilometers
an
per hour,
icing
maybe a
cinnamon
little
roll.
slower, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black incredibly thin creature, with a bulbous head, walking up the side of a ditch towards the road, maybe 1.5 meters off the road. Listening to this story, it sounds very similar to a stick figure. It moved very fast, robotically almost, or comparable to a cartoon. Moving
Casco
fast
says
and leaving
lazy.
particles of themselves behind them, like
What's
swiftly
lazy?
walking up the ditch side. Doing some math, going 80 kilometers per hour, I cover 22 meters a second, around 73 feet. I saw the creature for about 3 to 5 seconds and didn't see anything in my mirror once I passed, albeit the night was upon the land and it was pitch black. What do you all think about this? My location was about 25 miles from a military base, the biggest base on the East Coast.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock
Oh,
strikes
yeah. They
midnight
should have shown the
Central
drawing.
Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
Can't still imagine him coated in beer kake. Imagination. 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 Uh-oh. My second wind is starting to fade. I might have to lie down for a nap. Oh, shit. Oh. Camp Odakota. Camp Odakota.
Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I am writing about something that happened to me about 20 years ago. I live in a small lake area called Boners Lake, just outside of Burlington, Wisconsin.
Boners.
At the time of this tale, I lived on the opposite side of the lake from where I live now, about a half-mile away from a Boy Scout camp called Camp Odakota. This camp encompasses 185 acres of beautiful rolling hills and woodlands on Dyer Lake. It was a beautiful summer day, and I decided to take a walk with my dogs.
Did he say Dyer Lake? I heard it as Boner Lake.
I went a different way than usual and happened upon the back trail to the camp. It was chained off, but I chanced it anyway and hopped over to check it out.
Go has a
The
nap
trail
so
was
I
very
can
quiet and
so you can
peaceful,
work
and we
my
walked a while
squishy ass
enjoying
motor later.
ourselves greatly. After a bit, we came upon some buildings. One was a large pole barn
Yeah,
type
that
that had its
sounds
doors
good.
chained